The live stream has started. 30 seconds.
Good evening. Welcome to the October meeting of the Durham Planning Commission. The members of the Durham Planning Commission have been appointed by the City Council and the County Board of Commissioners to make recommendations to the elected officials. You should note that the elected officials have the final say on any issue before us tonight. While this meeting is being conducted in person, it is also accessible using the Zoom virtual meeting platform. In the virtual meeting platform, public participants do not have the ability to talk or be seen on video by default. To maintain meeting decorum and a discernible record of the meeting, the chat function has been disabled. For those attending in person, if you plan to speak on an agenda item tonight, please go to the table to my left to sign up to speak. When speaking, please state your name and your address clearly when you come to the podium to my right. And please speak directly into the microphone. If you are attending the meeting virtually, you will be given the ability to speak at the appropriate time. If you have pre-registered, your name will be called for you to make your comments. You may also call in during the meeting tonight by dialing 1-301-715-8592. If you call in during the meeting, you will need to wait until the particular public hearing you are interested in starts. After all of the in-person and pre-registered speakers have shared their comments, I will ask if there's anyone else wishing to speak. At that point, you will need to digitally raise your hand by pressing *9 on your phone, and when recognized, state your name and address before making your comments. Finally, all motions are stated in the affirmative, so if a motion fails or ties, the recommendation is for denial. Thank you, and may we have roll call.
Good evening. All right, Chair Amendolia.
Here.
Vice Chair Cameron.
Here.
Commissioner Baker.
Here.
Commissioner Chagaris.
Here.
Thank you, sorry about that. Commissioner Cutright.
Here.
Commissioner Davis.
Here.
Commissioner Harrod.
Here.
Commissioner McIver.
Here.
Commissioner Morgan.
Here.
Commissioner Cease.
Here.
Commissioner Carmen Williams.
Here.
Commissioner Zuri Williams emailed earlier. I don't believe she's going to make it tonight, Chair. So we have a quorum.
Thank you. Before we get into our business for the night, I want to go over a couple of announcements and allow some of our new commissioners to introduce themselves. First, I do want to just take a moment to acknowledge and have my thoughts with the family of the person who, it was announced, was struck by the train in downtown Durham. This is an unfortunate reminder of the need for more pedestrian safety, a topic that we talk about a lot on this commission, and I just wanted to take a moment to recognize that and to put my thoughts with them and their family and wish the best for their family and hope for us to do better in the future. With that, I also wanted to announce that on October 19th at 1 p.m., our subcommittee that is reviewing the privately initiated text amendment, case TC 22-0001, will be meeting in the planning department downstairs. Again, that meeting is on October 19th at 1 p.m. I believe that meeting is open to the public for folks to attend, but it is not a public hearing, so it's really just an opportunity for our commissioners on that committee to discuss. Grace, do you want to add anything to that?
All of that is correct. The meeting space is downstairs in the planning department, so you would come in the building just like you did tonight, take the elevator to the ground level, and come to the planning department and let them know you would like to attend the meeting, and you will be taken to the meeting space.
Thank you. And in our last meeting, we welcomed Commissioner Davis for the first time, and that was a pretty packed agenda, so we didn't really take a lot of time for introductions and whatnot, but Commissioner Davis, I wanted to provide you a chance to introduce yourself and say any remarks you feel are relevant.
I just, like he said, I'm Commissioner Brandon Davis, lifelong Durham resident, so just here trying to help and do what I feel is necessary for the community.
Thank you. And then we gave Commissioner Shigaris a way easier load for her first meeting. Commissioner Shigaris, would you like to introduce yourself and say any comments?
Yes, hello. My name is Sarah Shigaris. I moved to Durham in 1979, so I've lived here quite some time. Seen a lot of changes over the years. Retired from Pfizer at the end of 2020 and looking forward to contributing to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we're going to move into our agenda items for the evening. First on our agenda is approval of the minutes and consistency statements from the September 13th meeting. Do we have any adjustments or comments on the minutes? Seeing none, I would accept a motion at this time.
Move for approval of the minutes.
Second.
I have a motion from Vice Chair Cameron and a second from Commissioner Baker. Any comment on the motion? Seeing none, may we have we don't have to do a roll call vote. Great. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed have the same right. The motion passes unanimously. Great, so now we will, first, staff, is there any adjustments to the agenda tonight?
Staff does not propose any adjustments. However, I would let Planning Manager Cahill speak with you about maybe one item that will not be heard.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, all. We did want to let you know that all items have been noticed according to the Unified Defendant Ordinance, and affidavits of these notices are on file in the Planning Department. However, there was a defective notice on staff's part for the Crescent Drive Assemblage case. Therefore, we'll be pulling that case tonight, and we have let the applicant know. We've also reached out to community members that registered on behalf of that item, and it will be heard on the November Planning Commission. There's nothing you need to do and no action you need to take.
Thank you. And just to reiterate that point, if you arrive tonight to speak on the second case on our agenda, that's Z2200003 Crescent Drive Assemblage, we will not be hearing that case tonight. It is going to be moved to our November meeting. Great. With that, we will go ahead and turn to our public hearings. We'll begin with case Z2100044 Aura Hillandale West, and we'll begin with the staff presentation.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission and all those in attendance. I'm Demir Powell with the Planning Department. This is case Z2200003 Crescent Drive Assemblage for a proposed zoning map change. Oh, sorry. No, this is my notes, sorry. Excuse me, this is for Z2100044 Aura Hillandale West. The proposal is located at 3438 Hillsborough Road. The site is within city limits in the urban tier. The 5.37 acre site is currently zoned industrial light. The proposed zoning is planned development residential on 59.102 units per acre to facilitate the construction of a maximum 387 multifamily apartment units. The existing future land use map designation is industrial, and the proposal is inconsistent with this designation. If the proposal is approved, staff recommend a change to the future land use map designation to high-density residential. The existing zoning is industrial light. The zoning of surrounding properties include industrial light, residential suburban 10, RS 10, and commercial neighborhood and commercial general. The aerial map shows the general location of the project. The site is located adjacent to a mix of retail, a grocery store, and a transit station. It is also located within 2 miles from parks, healthcare services, and Duke University. A minimum 39 income-restricted units shall be provided within the apartment building. At least 33% of the units shall have rents for households earning 60% of an area median income. No more than 33% of the income-restricted units may have rents greater than 80% of the area median income. The proposal also commits to a 30-year affordability deed restriction, as well as at least 20% of the units being 2-bedroom. Income-restricted units will be dispersed throughout different buildings, and this project will be ineligible for funding from the city's Affordable Housing Fund. The applicant has also included graphic and text commitments. They include the following. Residential buildings over 2 stories shall include an elevator. The recreation, open space, tree planting area will be a privately maintained park and will be open to the public. A public access easement shall be provided around the recreation, open space, and tree planting area. Contiguous multifamily buildings of varying heights, enveloping and concealing a private structured parking. The private structured parking will be provided. Proposed buildings will be set back from LaSalle Street to allow a landscape amenity area along the east edge of the property. The applicant has proposed the following features on the site: 387 multifamily units with a maximum building height of 75 feet. For site circulation, the site would have 2 access points located off North LaSalle Street. A continuous sidewalk will be provided along Crescent Drive to accommodate the multi-use path recommendation of the comprehensive plan. Crescent Drive roadway improvements are to be completed per approved site plan D20000287. A crosswalk connection shall be provided across from Crescent Drive at the future Wendell Road intersection. And the proposal commits to a maximum proposed 89% impervious surface area and the minimum required open space amount of 20% of the site area. It also commits to the minimum tree coverage requirement for the site. A project boundary buffer has been provided along with the property lines in accordance with the Unified Development Ordinance. The applicant held a neighborhood meeting on November 22nd, 2021, and 4 social pinpoint comments were provided from the public. Except for the future land use designation, staff determines that this request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and other adopted ordinances and policies. If the request is approved, the FLUM designation, the future land use map designation, shall be amended to maintain consistency. Although the current zoning is industrial light, the site is in an area with a diverse mix of uses on adjacent properties and along Hillsborough Road, such as shopping centers, retail, and other residential land uses. The site acreage, proximity to adjacent uses, and multimodal transportation access are adequate to serve the proposed 387 units. The proposal commits to a minimum 39 income-restricted units and an affordability deed restriction to preserve affordability for a period of 30 years. The density and inclusion of affordable housing increases equitable access to employment, educational institutions, healthcare, and other beneficial locations and amenities that are within a few miles of the site towards the urban city center of Durham. The traffic generated would increase by 1,869 trips, which may create adverse impacts on adjacent properties along North LaSalle Street. However, there are nearby transit stops and pedestrian paths that may reduce in reducing traffic congestion in this area. And staff and the applicant are available to answer any questions.
Thank you. With that, we're going to open the public hearing. We'll begin with the applicant presentation. And applicant, you'll have 10 minutes to provide your opening remarks. Grace, while they're presenting, can you bring me the sign-up sheet for public comment?
Sorry, could we have our, let me see, is there a pinpoint on here? PowerPoint? Let's see. Is the PowerPoint on here? Okay. Okay, and excuse me, does this work to change it? Or should I just say next slide? Got it. Thank you. Chairman Amendolia, Vice Chair Cameron, members of the Planning Commission, my name is Patrick Biker. I live at 2614 Stewart Drive. I'm an attorney with Morningstar Law Group, and I'm here tonight representing Trinsic Residential Group. Joining me tonight are Justin Brown with Trinsic, and then our land planning leader is Dan Jewell, president of Coulter Jewell Townes. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, I think this is the staff presentation. Wait a minute. Oh, sorry. Could you go to the next one, please? That's it. At the outset, I want to stress that we had strong community engagement regarding the redevelopment of the 6.5-acre site. The site is currently zoned industrial light with no development plan, and it contains an abandoned building that was built 49 years ago, back in 1973. During the past several months, our team has met both with residents who live along the other side of LaSalle Street, as well as various representatives of the Watts Hospital Hillandale Neighborhood Association. I think it is fair to say we have reached consensus on many major aspects of the development plan before the Planning Commission tonight. But of course, I will add that we realize we cannot please everybody, and there are some minor points of disagreement that are outstanding. I hope you have a chance to review this slide that illustrates what the points of agreement are, and we're very pleased with this level of consensus. Perhaps the main item of disagreement relates to the existing pine trees along the west side of LaSalle Street towards Sprung Avenue. Our understanding is that the city is undertaking new sidewalk construction along this side of LaSalle Street, and that sidewalk construction will remove these pine trees in any event. Of course, our team is very enthusiastic to bring forward an infill redevelopment site with income-restricted housing that Trinsic will provide with no city subsidy. Besides there being no city subsidy, it is vital to highlight that in regard to the structured parking, the on-site amenities, and the quality of the interior construction, all of these income-restricted units will be completely indistinguishable from Trinsic's market rate units. In addition, these income-restricted units will be floating throughout the building and not confined to one level or one section. Without a doubt, this type of income-restricted housing is very expensive to provide. Next slide, please. Sorry, it's the wrong PowerPoint. Shoot. In addition to income-restricted housing, we have committed to a large park area along LaSalle Street. This park will be open to the public, and it will be a great neighborhood amenity, especially when compared to the sea of asphalt that is there right now. The staff report did a great job highlighting all the community benefits associated with our development. And in closing, one community benefit that I wish to highlight is that there is transit service near this site on Go Durham Route 11. And that bus route provides direct 5-minute commute from this site to Duke Hospital, our community's largest employer. Accordingly, for all these reasons, we respectfully request your recommendation of approval, and our team will be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll turn to public comment. We have 4 people that signed up here in person, and I'll just have y'all go ahead and start lining up to speak. I can see we have Tom Miller and Dot Doyle, and then there are 2 names that I am having a harder time reading, but the first name is Guy. The second person, the first name looks like Karen, potentially. So when you come up, please state your name and address. And after our in-person speakers, we'll go to folks who have joined by Zoom. If you are currently on Zoom, please go ahead and start raising your hand so that you are queued up when we move to virtual participants. But with that, we'll start with the in-person folks. Tom Miller, you can go first. You'll have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the commission. It's nice to be back and see you all again. My name is Tom Miller, and tonight I speak on behalf of the Watts Hospital Hillandale Neighborhood Association, an organization that's been around for 40 years, and I currently serve on the board of directors. We sent you a letter our president did last night. I hope you've had an opportunity to see it. I want to say that at this point we support this project. Our support is with reservations. The reservations are not over points of disagreement, but there are refinements to the commitments in the development plan that we will hope to continue to work with the developer on. We met with the developer last week, and there is agreement that we will continue to work, and by the time we get to the City Council, we should have all of those things hammered out. None of the things that we are working on would constitute significant changes to the development, to this project as it's described to you in the staff report and in the developer's current development plan. Just some refinements, design of the building, some items having to do with planning and things like that. This is a project that has essentially 60 units an acre. That's pretty dense for Durham. It has a lot of good things, though. One of the policies of the current comprehensive plan is reusing essentially obsolete commercial centers. This is a time when we're actually doing that. And it's one of the things that our residents have noted. Of course, we're concerned about traffic impacts, and maybe we can work some of those out. Thank you very much. We're available for questions if you have them.
Thank you. Our next speaker can go ahead and come up. And if you're also planning to speak on this case, please go ahead and line up, and you can just come one after the other.
Hello, I'm Dot Doyle. I live at 2311 Woodrow Street. I'm Vice President of the Watts Hospital Hillandale Neighborhood Association. When we first started discussing this project with the builder, I was the president, so I've been involved pretty much from jump. We have had a number of meetings. I think we have found Mr. Stewart and the people at Trinsic to be very open to conversation, which we appreciate. We've had a small committee, because you can't meet with everybody all the time, of people, 4 people who live right along LaSalle. There, one person from Sprunt Street, who represents the concerns about traffic on Sprunt, and then someone else from Mountain View, which is 1 block over. And that person has been pretty attentive to some of the trash and other issues that have been going on in this property. As Tom has mentioned, it's been sort of a tacky property for a number of years since Best Products moved out. And so I think we do think that this is going to be an improvement, assuming that we can work things out. And I have no reason to believe that the things that Mr. Stewart has talked with us about are not going to happen. We just would like to see them in writing. So there has been a lot of conversations. There's been 3 or 4 meetings between Mr. Stewart and our smaller group. There's been just us, a meeting of neighbors. And then last week, in addition to the meeting that was mentioned in November, we also met last week with anybody in Watts Hillandale who wanted to talk with Mr. Stewart, and he made a presentation then. So I think we're feeling pretty good about this, and we look forward to continuing working with Mr. Stewart.
Hello, my name's Guy Mayer. I live at 1515 Mountain View Avenue, directly under this proposed development. From our bedroom, kitchen, and living room, we'll have a direct view of the upper floors of this building, so it matters quite a bit to us. Unfortunately, we weren't invited into this small group for whatever reason. I spoke a lot at the initial call. I thought record would taken, but never heard anything. So it's unfortunate that earlier in the process, I didn't learn of things like the tree survey that was supposed to count every tree larger than 18 inches. That's about that big. It counted 1 tree. It left out 37. So it left out a lot of information about the existing conditions and kind of hopped over it. And we feel it's inaccurate and unfortunate and really doesn't help the planning process. So my request is to hold off on rezoning until the application is complete. There's also the question of the 5th prong of the building. The northernmost one is mighty close to the sidewalk. That wasn't what I had envisioned. You can see it really well through slide 18 or so in their submission. So even their artist renderings show a lot of concrete out there, and they don't show any of these 60 healthy, mature native trees. I'm a board certified master arborist. I've been working with urban trees for 57 years. And there's no reason those trees can't go many more decades. This is confirmed by North Carolina State University dendrologists and others. So I'd like a complete tree survey as promised, and some consideration of the building so close to the sidewalk, and retaining these assets that are very key to our neighborhood in terms of air and water, cleaning, purification. You all know what good trees do.
Your 2 minutes are up.
These are good trees. So,
Thank you. Your
Thank
2 minutes are up.
I would just like to echo what Guy just said. Karen Cantor, and I live at 1515 Mountain View Avenue, which is around the corner. And we will be able to see this new structure. I'm concerned about many, many issues. I joined with Guy about the trees and all the benefits that they give. New trees take many, many, many years until they can give the benefits that trees that are already standing there can give. And I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about not really being included in having our voices consulted for what's going on directly around the corner from us. With deference to the leadership of the association, they live on the other side of Hillandale. They're not going to be affected the way we are. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. With that, we'll turn to folks who are attending via Zoom. I see one person has their hand raised already. If you're attending via Zoom and would like to speak on this case as well, please go ahead and raise your hand. We'll start with P. Williams. I believe this is Pam Williams.
That's correct. Good afternoon. My name is Pam Williams. I live at 2130 Adventure Trail in Durham, lifelong resident of Durham, North Carolina. And my sister worked at Best Buy long, long time ago. But anyway, my concerns are the comment where the 27 high school students, Riverside is already over capacity. And also what exactly happens there, and I don't know if the planning commission or the developer will comment on that. My other concern is the tree issue, as previously stated, with a 12-foot buffer, boundary buffer, and then it says width if reduced. I don't see how you're going to get an 8 opacity unless you build nothing but fences, and I don't think Durham wants to be nothing but fences. We need to look to try to maintain the existing trees, because the new trees will not grow in our lifetime and hide or provide a vista that I think Durham wants to have. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this case at this time? Okay, I am seeing no hands raised in Zoom and no one is standing at the podium. Mr. Biker, you had 7 minutes remaining of your time if you would like to utilize it.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're happy to just answer any questions that the commission may have as best we can. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, we'll turn to commissioner comments and questions. Who would like to start? Commissioner Carmen Williams.
So during the staff presentation, it said that it had an access point on Crescent Drive, and I just don't see how that's possible.
My apologies. Please disregard any reference to Crescent Drive. And there's another street I mentioned. I got the cases mixed up.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, I would just state for the record that for me, I am excited, as was stated by some of the speakers, to see a reuse of existing space to build more housing and to build more densely, and think this is the type of redevelopment that I would like to see more of in Durham. And hope that this can also be kind of a catalyst for this particular neighborhood in Durham, because there's a lot of redevelopment that could happen there that would be really beneficial. With that, I'm going to Commissioner Baker.
Yeah, just one thing I wanted to say is, we're often told by developers, we can't do good design, it's too expensive. We can't incorporate affordable housing, it's too expensive. We can't work with neighbors, it's too expensive. And once in a while, we get cases like this that show us that it is possible. And so I think that it's something that we can all learn from and keep in mind when each of these cases comes before us. So I appreciate the work that's been done on this one. Of course, we'd always like to see more affordable housing. We'd always like to see housing that's affordable for a longer period than just 30 years and more deeply affordable. But this is pretty good compared to what we usually see. So thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments or questions, I would accept a motion at this time.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we take case Z2200044, the Aura Hillandale West case, to be forwarded to the City Council with a favorable recommendation.
Second. Moved by Commissioner Morgan, seconded by Commissioner Baker. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, may we have the roll call vote?
Chair Amendoya,
Yes.
Vice Chair Cameron,
Yes.
Commissioner Baker,
Yes.
Commissioner Shakaris,
Yes.
Commissioner Cutright,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Harrod,
Yes.
Commissioner McIver,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Cease,
Yes.
Commissioner Carmen Williams.
Yes.
It's unanimous. Passes 11-0.
Thank you. Thank you to staff. Thanks to the applicant and the community members that have been engaged in this process throughout. With that, we're going to head to our next public hearing. As a reminder, we are not hearing the second item listed on the agenda that was posted online because of the notice requirements for that case. So we are moving to the third item on our agenda, which is case Z2200004 Welcome Venture Park. We'll begin with the staff presentation.
Demir Powell, Planning Department. This case is Z22004 Welcome Venture Park for a proposed zoning map change. It is associated with an annexation case, BDG 2204, to request an annexation into city limits. The proposal is located at Hamlin Road and Old Oxford Road. The site is currently in the county, and a concurrent application is associated with this proposal to annex the entire site into city limits. It is located within the suburban development tier, and the proposal includes 3 parcels which total 157.37 acres that are currently zoned industrial light. The proposed zoning is industrial light with a development plan to facilitate the construction of a maximum 1,300,000 square feet of industrial space. The existing future land use map designation is industrial, and the proposal is consistent with this designation. The existing zoning is industrial light. The site is surrounded by rural residential, residential suburban 20, planned development residential, and industrial light zoning. The aerial map shows the general location of the project. There are several residential neighborhoods, industrial uses, and a school within a mile of the site. However, commercial, park and open space, healthcare, and food access is farther away. The closest transit stop is also 1.5 miles away from the site. The site is within the Bragtown neighborhood, a historically marginalized neighborhood that has expressed concerns with this proposal. The applicant has met with the community to address their concerns, which include issues such as rising housing costs, displacement, and a loss of a sense of belonging. 2 open houses were held for the Bragtown community to attend. There is an outstanding issue raised by the community requesting the allocation of some of the jobs created on site for members of the community. This is something that the applicant is working with the community to achieve. The applicant has included graphic and text commitments. They include additional asphalt along Hamlin Road to allow a bicycle lane, 110 feet of dedicated right-of-way for the proposed Northern Durham Parkway, dedicated right-of-way for the frontage of the site along Hamlin Road to accommodate roadway improvements, dedicated right-of-way for proposed interior streets, a project boundary buffer of 20 feet and an opacity of 40% along Hamlin Road, 4 bus stops with landing pads and shelters along Hamlin Road and Northern Durham Parkway, a limited number of uses listed in text commitment number 8. For context, some of the permitted uses that are listed include research and development, shelter, food bank or kitchen, vocational trade or business schools, places of worship, indoor recreation, restaurants, limited retail sales, office, and light industrial facilities. Additional commitments include transportation commitments for various roadway improvements. Loading bays are proposed to be oriented internally to building sites and to the rear of buildings. Buildings are to be consistent with modern flex industrial style developments in the Triangle region. Next slide, please. Alexander. Next slide, please. Thank you. The applicant proposes the following features on site. A maximum floor area of 1,300,000 square feet. There is an intermittent stream on the site. A 50-foot riparian buffer and a 10-foot no-build buffer setback is provided from the stream. The proposed parking and building envelope does not intrude upon the 100-year floodplain. For site circulation, the site would have 2 access points off Hamlin Road with one that extends to the northern property line. Pedestrian connection will be constructed from the proposed multi-use path along the proposed Northern Durham Parkway to existing public sidewalk on Hamlin Road. 5 feet of additional widening along Hamlin Road will be provided along the development frontage for the installation of a bicycle lane. A stub out is proposed to be provided by private access easement along the eastern property line from the new cul-de-sac indicated on the development plan to the adjacent property to the east. An additional stub out is also indicated to the northwest of the site to the adjacent property to the west. The proposal commits to a maximum proposed 70% impervious surface and the required 10% tree preservation on site. Project boundary buffers are provided that comply with the Unified Development Ordinance. The applicant held a neighborhood meeting on November 4th, 2021. 3 social pinpoint comments were provided. Staff determines that this request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and other adopted ordinances and policies. The proposal is appropriate for the site, but there are several considerations for potentially adverse impacts. The proposal would provide beneficial industrial employment opportunities. The proposed uses listed in text commitment 8 of the development plan are appropriate given the current zoning and adjacent zoning on other properties, being industrial light with some rural residential and planned development residential in the vicinity. The mix of these potential uses would improve the land use diversity in the area that may serve the Bragtown community and residential subdivisions within a mile of the site. The proposal includes numerous transportation improvements, such as bicycle lanes, interior public streets, multi-use paths, bus stops along Hamlin Road, and the dedication of right-of-way for the proposed Northern Durham Parkway that would increase sustainable multimodal accessibility throughout the site and the surrounding area. However, there are some concerns that have been expressed by the Bragtown community for this proposal. And staff and the applicant are available to answer any questions.
Thank you. With that, we will open the public hearing. We'll begin with the applicant presentation. Looks like Mr. Patrick Biker is also on this case. Mr. Biker, you'll have 10 minutes.
Thanks. Just wait for Alexander to bring up another PowerPoint. Thanks. Perfect. Thank you. Good evening again, Chairman Amendolia, Vice Chair Cameron, members of the Planning Commission. I'm Patrick Biker. I still live at 2614 Stewart Drive. I'm an attorney with Morningstar Law Group, and I'm here tonight representing the Welcome Group, which is one of our nation's leading industrial and business developers based in Houston, Texas. With me tonight are Randy Warren, our lead development consultant with RW2 Development, as well as Brendy Vega, who's with Withers and Ravenel, our land planning and civil engineering firm. And then Earl Llewellyn is our traffic engineer with Kimley Horn for the 157-acre assemblage that we are calling Welcome Venture Park. Next slide, please. As the Planning Commission may have observed, it is not uncommon for large projects such as this one in the northern and eastern sections of Durham County to be accommodating a segment of Northern Durham Parkway. Since that road was shown on the thoroughfare plan, has been shown on our thoroughfare plan for, I think, 40 or 50 years. Commissioner Davis, you may remember talk about it in North Durham back in the 90s. Accordingly, the Welcome Group has no choice but to align its main access on the north side of Hamlin Road with the right-of-way for Northern Durham Parkway that has already been dedicated on the south side of Hamlin Road. We certainly appreciate the concerns of residents who live in the Ellerby Creek Preserve neighborhood regarding increased traffic. However, the mandate to comply with the current comprehensive transportation plan means that the business park before you tonight has to align its section of Northern Durham Parkway with the right-of-way dedicated in conjunction with that neighborhood back in 2006. Next slide, please. Besides following the long-term plans for Northern Durham Parkway, this development plan implements our future land use map and the long-term industrial light zoning that's been in place for these 157 acres for at least 3 decades. All we are doing with this rezoning is adding a development plan so that we can add text commitments to benefit this area, especially the Bragtown neighborhood. We are blessed to have had strong community engagement for quite a few months in regard to Welcome Venture Park. We are in frequent communications with the leadership of the Bragtown Community Association as our team moves forward with evaluating infrastructure and job-related initiatives to improve the quality of life in Bragtown. Next slide, please. One last point that I believe is not addressed in your staff report. Oh, sorry, could the PowerPoint come back up? You got it. One last point that I believe is not addressed in your staff report is that the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality has designated this 157-acre assemblage we're discussing tonight as a brownfields eligible site, and that occurred on December 22 of last year. The Phase 1 and Phase 2 environmental site assessments that the Welcome Group Commission demonstrated that volatile organic compounds spilled by the former Mitsubishi Semiconductor plant, now KBI Biopharma, to the southwest of our site, have contaminated the groundwater and migrated onto the Welcome Group's 157-acre assemblage. Welcome Group's environmental assessments also identified releases of chlorinated solvents from the Beckman property to the east of our site. These releases of pollution further contaminated the Welcome Group's 157 acres, which in turn led to DEQ's approval of this 157-acre site to be brownfields eligible. Therefore, the Welcome Group will be shouldering increased site costs associated with mitigation and remediation of these pollutants should this rezoning be approved. Accordingly, to support this brownfields remediation moving forward, and to implement the light industrial zoning that has been in place for decades in order to create jobs in this part of Durham, we respectfully request your recommendation of approval. Our team will be happy to try and answer any questions. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. So we have several people signed up to speak in person. I'm going to read off their names, and everyone can line up at the podium, and you'll all have 2 minutes to speak. And then if there's anyone planning to speak via Zoom, please go ahead and start raising your hands and queuing yourselves up there. But signed up in person, we have Donna Friedrich, Valerie Valentine, Natalie Pickett, Vanessa Evans, and Helena Craig. And you all can just go one after the other. You'll each have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Donna Frederick, and I live 603 East Club Boulevard in Bragtown. I'm here because in support of all the community engagement that this project has brought to us. Unbelievably, a lot of time has been spent, hours and hours actually, hammering over the fine details of what this project would bring to our community. The access of jobs that is so needed in this area that are not 775, but higher interest type of programs that will be in these buildings. So we've been really working with this group and reaching out to other community leaders to make sure that this process comes to pass. One thing I must say, that working with groups, you're always going to have some disagreements, and it's no different with ours. When BCA was started, we've been working with development coming into our area to, as you heard, an underserved area. Options with everyone's opinions is great. But one thing we must know, we do need these developments in our areas to grow. So I'd just like to say on behalf of Bragtown and myself who live there, that we are in support of this project.
Hello, my name is Valerie Valentine, and I have lived at 1115 Golden Crest Drive since 2007 in Ellerby Creek Preserve. My house sits on the corner of Hamlin Road and Golden Crest Drive. I am asking you to slow the developer's plan for light industrial development on Hamlin Road until they can provide a more detailed development plan. While I do not oppose all development in this area, I would like development that is transparent and protects the interest of all, not some, of the surrounding community. Last month, I came to you as you considered the prospect of a gas station on the corner of Hamlin and Old Oxford. I ask that you consider all of the existing and impending development in our area, and today I'll repeat that request. Please consider that Hamlin Road is home to the city's construction landfill, the School of Creative Studies, the Durham Public Schools bus depot, in addition to single-family homes and farms on Hamlin. Please also consider the 800 New Carver Street Extension residents that will live on 134 acres of land, which is now connected to Hamlin Road. I do not think it is unreasonable to ask that developers have a more specific development plan for an 160-acre development. I do not want this area's future to be left to chance. It seems that text amendments have left out the interest of residents on Hamlin Road, who are not part of Bragtown, but will directly bear years of construction, increased traffic, and decreased safety. My original concern about the number and location of access points on Hamlin Road have been reduced to 2, but the increased traffic and the North Durham Parkway is still unclear to me. Will it go through our neighborhood or around it? I don't see evidence of streetlights, signage, or traffic calming mechanisms on Hamlin Road. One light at Red Mill Road is not enough. I would also like to add to the list of things that are not a part of this development, a tobacco vaping retail sites, drive-through restaurants,
Ms. Valentine.
car washes.
Apologies, your 2 minutes are up. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Natalie Pickett. I live at 1111 Paul Road. That's less than a half-mile away from this property being proposed. The community that we're in, Ms. Valentine, Ms. Craig, and myself tonight, is in the Old Oxford Hamlin intersection community, including Ellerby Creek Preserve, that, to my knowledge, is a bit northeast of the Bragtown community historically. Just to note that, I wasn't sure of the discrepancy there. I'm standing before you against the current proposal. As Ms. Valentine stated, it does not include enough information about the development plan for my comfort. There was information presented to community members at a community meeting in August about building size, number of buildings, placement, some mock-ups that were shown that are not in this development plan currently, so I'm not sure what happened to those ideas. There are quite a few existing residents in very close proximity to this proposal, including directly across the street, Ellerby Creek Preserve, which is where Ms. Valentine referenced living, as well as 6 households on Hamlin whose backyards are adjacent to the proposed development. The development plan that has been submitted tonight shows a 50-foot building and parking envelope from those adjacent properties, but doesn't show any of the planned building placements to know how close this will actually be getting. There's no tree buffer shown between those backyards and the development. And same goes for where this access point would be, as far as, will there be buildings and parking right up to the road across from these neighbors, or will there be a buffer? We're not sure. There's not enough information. It also includes a 20 and 10-foot building and parking envelope respectively to the proposed Roxborough Rail Trail, but again, not sure how close these buildings will get to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Helena Craig at 1016 Old Oxford Road. Really, I'm here to emphasize and reiterate what Valerie and Natalie have already said. There's not to date been enough engagement with those directly impacted property owners, the Durham County communities such as Ellerby Creek Preserve and Colonial Heights, who will be the ones who are actually impacted. This area is just directly northeast of Bragtown, and while we appreciate the conversations that Bragtown has had with the developer and agree with many of the points, what we feel is that because we have not been in those conversations, is very sparse information that we've received other than the virtual meeting in November and the meetings organized with Bragtown community leadership. However, neighbors directly impacted on Hamlin Road, Ellerby Creek Preserve, Colonial Heights, and unincorporated Durham County really haven't been afforded that access. And at the last Bragtown meeting that I went to, I specifically asked Mr. Biker, could we get a meeting? And he said no. We agree with many of the goals that have been worked on. We don't have a complaint with that. We would just like to have the opportunity to discuss the more nitty-gritty details, in particular access points. So we feel sort of behind the eight ball in that we don't have opposition to there being industrial continuing there, but we have not been afforded access to discuss the impact of access points, whether there can be more tree buffers. And as generally speaking, this area feels like it's the next Southeast Durham, and there's not a comprehensive outlook on how to develop this area. And we just feel a sore point of developers driving what our neighborhood will look like. So that's the overarching concern that I bring to you tonight. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Vanessa Mason Evans. I stay at 3223 Dearborn Drive. I would first like to say from a past meeting y'all had, there were things spoken about the BCA that were not true. So as I go forward, I would like to say when you speak of the BCA, it should be coming from the BCA and not residents of Bragtown. The development that we've been working with, the Welcome Group, has done an awesome job at meeting with the community, having several in-person meetings, as well as our Zoom meetings. Our Zoom meetings have held from 15 to 30-something people. The community is for this development. With the development that will be built close to this development of having close to 800 houses, these are places where people are saying that they could better work. Also, in working with the Welcome Group, I've worked beside Randy, along with Donna, and talking with Lakeview School, and talking with Dr. Gowling, and Wanda Reese, who wants to make sure that the students at that school are able to get good paying jobs when they graduate. So it's not like we're not talking to the community. We're reaching out to several different networks. We're also trying to network with Durham Tech to make sure that these students can get good paying jobs, go to school, get the skills that they need. And one of the things that we're working on right now is a welding class. So if people are not in our meetings and they're having their own sidebar meetings, they won't know what's going on with the BCA. And I would just like for people who speak of the BCA, speak truly of what you know, and what you don't know, don't say. It was very hurtful to hear some lies that were told. So that's why I'm kind of, I don't know how to say it. I'm trying to stay professional, but at the same time, it's not good when people lie on a community. And if you're gonna get a win that's a true win. But if you're gonna build 800 houses in a community, there needs to be jobs in that space so people can work. And if they build those houses and apartments that are gonna be affordable, people should better get to work and walk and bike.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we're gonna turn to folks who are on the Zoom virtual platform to provide comment. Right now, I do not see anyone on the Zoom meeting with their hand raised. If you are on Zoom and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand at this time so you may be acknowledged. Okay, I'm seeing no one raise their hand in the Zoom meeting. Mr. Biker, you had about 7 minutes left.
Just happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, I'll turn it to commissioner comments and questions. Commissioner Carmen Williams.
My first question is, was staff satisfied with the number of community meetings that were held as they pertain to the residents that were most impacted by this proposed development or rezoning change?
Alexander Cahill, City County Planning Department. I appreciate that question, and that is a really, really hard one to answer and very nuanced because I can't speak for the community, and I respect everyone out there. What I can say is the applicant has engaged more than other applicants have. They've held open houses. They have worked directly with the Bragtown Community Association. And while one association probably can't reach every single voice, they have done a very good job advocating for voices that maybe dissent from their own sometimes, which can be a hard thing to do as a community leader. So I can't say that I'm satisfied because there's always more we can do. There's always more the community wants to see. But what I can say is that the Welcome Group and Morningstar Law Firm has done a much better job than other applicants. Not saying they've all done a bad job, but to really be intentional in how they engage the community.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Cahill. And to that note, your designation or being able to achieve a designation to create brownfields in this area, which makes it more easily accessible to develop in a commercial standpoint than as a residential standpoint, because brownfields present hurdles in terms of chemical runoff as well as less than applicable or less than formidable methods of developing residential properties is commendable, because the use of brown and black fields go a long ways in terms of how we preserve the resources that we currently have. So I want to thank you for that. As long as that designation can continue to carry forward and it remains in your building plan, you shouldn't have any issues environmentally. And that's actually it for you. My next statement is for the BCA community. The passion that you use when you speak about this development and the urgent need for employment and employability in this issue without having to travel down Duke and Roxborough Road is essential. And I think that anything that will come in this area that will enhance your ability to work where you live is what we need more of, without stressing an already strained community in southern Durham, southeastern Durham, the central Durham area. I commend you for working tirelessly with this developer, and I also commend you for standing up for your community. I think that division is the greatest asset that many people have when trying to obtain assets that do not belong. So again, I commend the BCA community, and I am 100% in support for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. I had a couple questions for the applicant. Patrick, I was just wondering, could you explain a little bit more about this brownfield remediation? I've heard about it, but for the public's sake, could you kind of give us what that is, and then also explain the program and what kind of cost it would be to the developer to participate?
Let me preface my comments with saying environmental law is not my wheelhouse. So here's the point. The soils that are contaminated on site from the pollution releases I discussed during my presentation, as soils are moved on site, it has to be disposed of in a specific type of landfill for that type of contaminated soil. And this is all overseen by the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. So this is a statewide program. There are obviously many, many brownfield sites across the state of North Carolina, from Murphy to Manteo. So that's not an uncommon occurrence. But it does increase the site development costs. We can't just, dispose of the site, dispose of the any contaminated soils in some sort of routine fashion, which is what would happen in a typical development. It definitely adds increased transportation costs, increased disposal costs, increased monitoring costs, and increased compliance costs. All those items work together, but that, of course, makes the site, at least in part, remediated from the level of pollution that is there today. So in terms of what the dollars are, I have no idea. Obviously, this is going to be a phased development. It'll take many years to build it out. And I'm afraid I don't know exactly where the monitoring wells are. I mean, I'm obviously very familiar with this part of Durham and been to the site. I don't know exactly where the monitoring wells are and when the disposal will happen. But again, that's all overseen by the state, the North Carolina DEQ. So I've worked with those officials on numerous occasions over the past few years, and they run a very tight ship. And so it's increased cost for our team, but it's an increased community benefit for this part of Durham because, as Commissioner Davis may remember, Mitsubishi Semiconductor was a big deal back in the when was it? 1989, I think it was, when it moved here. And then it lasted about 8 years. Maybe you weren't born then. Sorry, my bad. These things happen. And so, yeah, this pollution happened over a long period of time, and all we can do is move forward and try to make the best of it.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to kind of bring that out because I know sometimes people are looking at that. I had a couple other questions. One is, what kind of development are you considering for that site? What kind of space or what kind
typically single story, what are referred to generally as flex buildings. So there'd be a combination of office, light manufacturing, research and development, assembly and distribution, that type of thing. It won't be dissimilar to many of the single story buildings you see around Research Triangle Park. Again, I don't mean to dwell on the past too much, but when I started working in Durham, and it's just telling it the way it is. When we competed for economic development back in the 80s and the 90s, we really only had Research Triangle Park and Trayburn, and those were only two venues to try to recruit new businesses to Durham. What I always heard, and it was a valid criticism, it's great that you got the jobs, it's great that you got the tax base, but Trayburn is too far north and RTP is too far south, and the folks who live in the old neighborhoods of Durham don't have access to those jobs. And I took that very personally, and I've always striven to bring these types of jobs closer to the neighborhoods so people can, as Ms. Mason-Evans said, I mean, ideally, you remember that this commission, many of you voted for the Carver Street assemblage. Well, there'd be a sidewalk from that Carver Street assemblage all the way into this industrial park. You could probably walk there in 10 minutes. You don't even have to pay for gas. So that's something that I've viewed as a personal mandate to bring job opportunities where they would be accessible to our people who really need them.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I apologize for the long-winded answer.
No problem. We'll see how the next question goes. The other question is on the Northern Durham Parkway. As far as, are you planning on building a segment of that?
Yes, sir.
If I heard it right?
Yes, sir. 1/2 segment across the property that the Welcome Group owns going north from Hamlin Road.
Okay. And is there any concern about alignment with right-of-way where, you know, for other?
No, sir. Earl and I, we're not allowed to say Eno Drive. Earl and I have been working on Northern Durham Parkway for 30 years now. So we're very familiar with it. And Randy and Brendy and their team, we've done a lot of work on this site to make sure the alignment works. So it'll be a 110-foot dedicated right-of-way, building a half section that'll be multimodal. Multi-use path as well as 1/2 of Northern Durham Parkway.
Okay, thank you. I'm interested in seeing that.
Thank you.
Completed as well. So,
yes, sir.
In my lifetime.
I'm holding up for my son's lifetime. Okay.
There you go. Thank you.
Other questions and comments?
Oh, yeah.
Commissioner Harrod.
Thank you, Patrick. This is sort of a broad-reaching question, but one of the problems we have in this country is we're not training people for the jobs that are available. And this is a specific example here in Durham, which will you folks still be working on possible solutions for people in the immediate neighborhoods to be able to have jobs in this site?
Absolutely. We've already started discussions with Durham Tech so that this is on their radar screen. They have their campus on Snow Hill Road, which is actually very close by to this. So it really does fit into the fabric of our community. Back in the 80s and the 90s, we viewed our industrial base as being from Mitsubishi up to Trayburn, and now this is finally starting to fill in that that design. And that is why the Durham Tech campus was built on Snow Hill Road back in the 80s or the 90s. I remember when it went in, but we've already reached out to Durham Tech. We're committed to having real-time access to job opportunities so that people who live in Durham can go to Durham Tech and obtain the certifications they need in order to access good-paying jobs.
Thank you. Great.
And again, I have to thank Randy. He's probably wearing out Durham Tech's speed dial.
Other questions or comments? Commissioner Carmen Williams.
Is there a possibility of EV charging stations in this area on site? Because that is definitely something that we're facing throughout the country as we're trying to shift to more sustainable driving methods or methods of transportation. Not that you have to commit to it, it's just a
Happy to look at it. Happy to look at it. What I understand, Commissioner Williams, and this is, those charging stations are provided by a third-party company. It wouldn't be the Welcome Group doing it. We would find a vendor. They look very carefully at the density of population in the area, and my fear is, you saw the aerial map, it's still pretty sparse out there. Obviously, we recognize all the people who came this evening and their concerns, but as you look out at that area, it's relatively sparse. So I'm sure our team will look at it. It's a great idea. Whether or not a third-party vendor would think it is a viable site, I have reservations about that because what I've heard on other projects, just that it's driven by having enough density around it for there to be demand for that facility. So we'll look at it, but I can't make any commitments tonight. Okay. Thanks for the idea.
Yeah, I mean, it makes all the sense in the world. Unfortunately, hindsight is 20/20. So I think you would attract more
Oh, of course.
use of that area, especially being so close to Trayburn, to be able to have access to that as a site for charging, because there wouldn't be anything else out there. There's barely a gas station, so yeah.
True.
That was all. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Commissioner Baker.
Baker.
I want to echo Commissioner Carmen Williams' earlier excitement about the possibility of jobs and the work that's been done to engage with the neighborhood association. Of course, this is a very large site, 150-something acres. And so I think that we do have to be very careful and apply a heavy scrutiny to something this large. There are also community-wide goals that we need to review this against. One of those being seeking and working toward greenhouse gas emissions and making sure that we're being more sustainable, providing more ways of getting around. So to be very clear, I'm very excited about the possibility of this being manufacturing, of this having jobs on the site, particularly if those jobs are being provided to residents in the nearby area who can access them very easily. This needs to be a place where there are jobs. So one of my questions is to the applicant, could you just walk us through a little bit more about the vision for the site? You mentioned one-story flex buildings, but can you talk a little bit about the arrangements of the buildings on the site? Are they behind giant parking lots? How are people navigating on 157 acres, massive, massive site? And, you know, we can't rely on a single applicant, single developer, single landowner to solve our climate crisis. But we all have to pitch in. We all have to do something. And developers, when they tear down huge amounts of trees and replace them with buildings, you know, have a large part in being able to shape a more sustainable world or a less sustainable world. And so could you speak a little bit to that and how this site will contribute to making Durham more sustainable?
Sure. The staff report and the staff presentation did highlight that we're trying to orient we are going to orient the buildings so that they are more fronting on the streets rather than having streets and then parking and then building. There'll be streets, building, parking. And I do want to emphasize the multi-use path and also direct your attention to the list of uses, because I think the list of uses we have there is pretty unique. You see that we want to incorporate places of worship, food shelter, food, what do you call it, like the food bank, places like that, so that people can do as much as they need to do within this Welcome Venture Park. So we want to attract, like, just an example, some sort of third places, you know, places where people want to go and relax after work rather than driving, you know, somewhere. They could just stay on site and only have their commute home. So it's really looking at building orientation, the mix of uses that we put a lot of thought into so that we can have as many diverse uses so that people can drive, park, and then not have to leave to meet all of their needs other than where they rest their head at night. So it really is trying to make this a multi-use venue that is attractive to the modern, that's a bad word, the younger worker. I mean, that's really what we're trying to think about, what we're trying to create here. And that's really at this stage what we can do. You know, trying to be, this site has a lot of stream buffers. We have to be a good environmental steward. If you take the 1.3 million square feet, it's only 19% of the site. So our building coverage is only 19% of the actual site. And that's a little bit higher than RTP, but it still, you know, I think reflects a good degree of providing an attractive venue for businesses who want to move there. There'll still be a lot of trees on site. There'll be walking paths, and we hope there'll be the type of venues that, quite frankly, it's what's been Research Triangle Park's Achilles heel. You work in RTP, where do you go to get a beer? Or a Coke? Yeah, I mean, what do you do? See, we're trying to overcome that with a park that's going to be attractive to this generation and generations to come. So that's why, you know, we put a lot of thought in that mix of uses. And I hope that's, I appreciate your point. And at the development plan site, you know, you're flying over a site at 20,000 feet with a development plan. It's only when you get into a site plan that you can really sort of drill down on what the building locations are. And again, because of the stream buffers and wetlands on site, we're definitely constrained in that regard.
Appreciate that. I appreciate the discussion about the arrangement of the buildings and the mixes of uses. I am aware that the list of uses that are allowed does not necessarily imply that many of them or all of them
of course
be included. Could just be one of them that covers the entire site and almost any arrangement according to this. So I appreciate the discussion and also aware that the discussion is not necessarily what's...
No, I appreciate that point. And again, we have no active tenants at this point in time. So, right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to try and move this along if possible. Are there any other questions or comments? I'll just state that I share some of the same concerns that I sense in Commissioner Baker's line of questioning there towards the end. I would feel more comfortable about this if there was a line in here that was like a minimum of 50 to 100,000 square feet dedicated to retail, something that could help me see that this ends up being truly mixed use, because as it's written, it doesn't have to be mixed use. It could be single use. And I would like to see the vision that you are casting actually lived out. And while I believe that's your intent, I would prefer to see it in writing. That is definitely something I will write in my comments and hope that can be worked out prior to going to City Council.
Okay.
Beyond that, to Commissioner Harrod's points earlier about actually connecting Durham residents to workforce training and to the eventual jobs that come on this site, For that, obviously, that's beyond the scope of this board, but I definitely call on our city leaders to facilitate that. I hear that you're in touch with Durham Tech right now. I know President Buxton is really sharp on these issues, and I hope you continue to connect him with BCA. I see members of our chamber here, and I hope that they participate in making sure that this happens. And we'll also be calling on our city council to ensure that accountability happens and all of this is seen through.
We welcome that. We appreciate it. That is exactly what we are here to do. And this is, again, I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Chairman. This build out is going to take years. This is, as I believe it was Commissioner Baker or perhaps Commissioner Morgan, this is a very large project. It's going to take years to build out. And so we are absolutely committed to building these relationships with our job training institutions to make sure that we do the very best we can for the residents of Durham, especially those who live in Bragtown.
Thank you. If there are no further questions or comments, I would like to move this forward to a vote.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we take case number Z2200004, the Welcome Venture Park, to be forwarded to the City Council with a favorable recommendation.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Morgan, seconded by Vice Chair Cameron. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, may we have the roll call vote?
Chair Amendolia,
Yes.
Vice Chair Cameron,
Yes.
Commissioner Baker,
Yes.
Commissioner Shigaris,
Yes.
Commissioner Cutright,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Harrod,
Yes.
Commissioner McIver,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Cease,
Yes.
Commissioner Carmen Williams.
Yes.
Passes unanimously, 11-0.
Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you, staff. Thank you to the applicant and to the community that's been involved in this. I would just like to commentate that it's really nice to be able to vote in favor of stuff. And I hope there's a strong message being sent tonight about the types of developments this commission favors versus the ones that we tend to see and often unanimously vote against.
Chair, staff would like to say there were some issues with the voting forms, and I had gotten a couple of emails. I think that's fixed now. So if you should be able to use the forms if a couple of you were having issues with it. So.
Thank you. With that, we're going to move into our last public hearing of the night. This is case Z2200007 Crescent Townes. Before we get started, I would like to give Commissioner McIver a chance to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just need to recuse myself because of a conflict of interest due to employment with part of the applicant team.
Thank you. Can we get a motion to recuse Commissioner McIver from this case?
So moved.
Seconded.
Moved by Commissioner Baker, seconded by Commissioner Morgan. Grace, can we just do an up and down?
Please.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed have the same right.
Thank you.
Let the record state that Commissioner McIver is recused from this case. We will now turn to the staff presentation.
Demir Powell, Planning Department. This case, Z2200007 Crescent Townes, is for a proposed zoning map change. The proposal is located along Crescent Drive. The site is currently in the county, and a concurrent application is associated with this proposal to annex the entire site into city limits. It is located within the Lee Village Compact Neighborhood Development Tier. The proposal includes 8 parcels, which total 8.53 acres, that are currently zoned residential suburban 20. The proposed zoning is residential compact with a development plan to facilitate the construction of a maximum 103 townhouse units. The existing future land use map designation is Design District. The proposal is consistent with this designation. The site is located within the major transportation corridor, the Interstate Highway 40 zoning overlay. The existing zoning is residential suburban 20. The zoning of surrounding properties adjacent to the site include residential suburban 20, residential compact, office and institutional, commercial neighborhood, and mixed use. And the aerial map here shows the general location of the project. The applicant has included graphic and text commitments. They include providing a minimum 70 feet of right-of-way for proposed collector streets, providing bicycle lanes and sidewalks along collector streets, providing a 10-foot shared path along Crescent Drive, providing direct access to buildings along each street frontage, limiting the building height to 60 feet, providing a 5-foot clear zone for sidewalks, providing streetscape amenities along Crescent Drive, which includes seating and waste receptacles, and providing pedestrian access between buildings. The applicant proposes the following features on site: the 103 multifamily units with a maximum building height of 60 feet. For site circulation, 2 public streets are proposed along Crescent Drive with stubs for future connections along the western property line. The proposal commits to a maximum proposed 70% impervious surface and the minimum required open space amount of 5% of the site area. The applicant held a neighborhood meeting on February 8th, 2022. 2 social pinpoint comments were provided. And staff determined that this request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and other adopted ordinances and policies. Furthermore, the zoning map change would allow for the increase of the housing supply in Durham with 103 townhouse units. The proposed density and number of units of this site are in a location in proximity to similar multifamily uses, as well as a mix of other uses that may serve the residents, such as parks, schools, retail, all within 3 miles of the site. The site is also within a mile of a transit stop that residents may use to access other areas of Durham. Historic and current flooding problems are present in the Celeste Circle area. The proposed development will be required to provide 100-year peak flow detention on site, and staff and the applicant are available to answer any questions.
Thank you. We're going to open the public hearing. Right now, we only have the applicant signed up to speak. So first off, if there's anyone in the Zoom meeting who plans to speak on this case, please go ahead and start raising your hand so that you can be queued up and ready to go. Also, staff, just a heads up, I'm going to want to look at the aerial map when I make my remarks, so if you want to have that queued up. Mr. Ghosh, you'll have 10 minutes to give your opening remarks.
Thank you, and good evening, Chair Amendolia, Vice Chair Cameron, members of the Planning Commission. I am Neil Ghosh, attorney with the Morningstar Law Group at 700 West Main Street here in Durham. I'm representing Tri Point Homes, which is the applicant for this project, and also with me tonight are Ms. Amanda Hoyle with Tri Point Homes and Ms. Ashley Hales with Stewart. Let me start first by thanking Mr. Powell for his presentation, not just on this one, but all night. I mean, running the Planning Commission solo. Kudos to you. As he described, we are seeking to rezone about 8.5 acres from its current RS20 designation to RC, or residential compact, with a development plan. The property in question is within the Lee Village compact neighborhood tier. And as you have seen in your staff report materials, the assemblage is kind of long and narrow. So the development opportunities are somewhat limited. I think the site depth is only about 360 feet wide at its widest point, so that presents a challenge. Additionally, there are segments of 2 different collector roads shown on the adopted collector street plan, which cut through this assemblage, so that is yet another development challenge for this site. As the name suggests, the RC district is meant to accommodate housing in a compact or dense format. This district allows for all types of housing types, including multifamily or single family, detached, but because of the site constraints and the fact that the site essentially is surrounded by multifamily projects, we felt townhomes make the most sense here. Under the UDO, the minimum required density in the RC district is 12 dwelling units per acre, and the maximum is 20 dwelling units per acre. As I understand it, there is a site plan in review for this site for about 103 townhomes. It's a tight fit, but it's still quite dense. And you can see on the development plan that the idea here is to have essentially 3 rows of townhomes and a road running north-south through the property and an alley also running north-south through the property. So in a sense, it's unfortunate that the collector road, at least the northern one, is where it is on the adopted collector street plan, because it creates a weird segment of property sandwiched in between that collector road and Wendell. But, that's the hand we're dealt, and I recognize that those collector roads on this property anyway are only a short segment across the property, but I will note that those will be very nice facilities once they are completed all the way through, not just across this property. If I understand correctly, the city has planned those roads with multi-use paths and street trees on both sides. They'll be really nice to walk down and to drive down whenever they do get built out, and this project will be providing segments of each of those. Finally, I just want to touch on a few last things. The staff report mentions, and we do plan to control the runoff for the 1, 2, 10, and 100-year storm events. The project also, the staff report also projects an increase in the number of students created by this project to be around 50, and as a result, we do want to make 2 monetary proffers. First would be a one-time contribution to Durham Public Schools in the amount of $25,000. And the second one would be a one-time contribution of $50,000 to the city's Affordable Housing Fund. We're happy to answer any questions you may have and look forward to your feedback.
Thank you, Mr. Ghosh. If there's anyone attending in person who would like to speak on this item, please come to the podium at this time. Okay, seeing no folks headed that way, there are a few people who have raised their hand in Zoom to speak virtually. And if there's anyone else attending via Zoom, please raise your hand now to get yourself in the queue. We'll begin with Elizabeth Brown, and then we'll go to Mimi Kessler and Ethan Tyler. Elizabeth, you're up first. You'll have 2 minutes to provide your comment. Please state your name and address and make your comments. Elizabeth, if you're speaking, we cannot hear you right now.
How now?
We can hear you.
We can hear you. Okay, great. Yeah. So my name's Elizabeth Brown. I'm at 5420 Wendell Road. And I've lived here for the last 5 years, which is odd because I haven't been contacted by the applicant about this project for input. But yeah, I mean, I really would like to see a greater commitment to sustainability and affordability from this project. I'd like to see some commitment to preserving trees. It's nice to hear that there are pedestrian amenities and that there's some commitment to having street trees, but I mean, it's a huge deal for walkability to have street trees that are protecting the sidewalks there, and that you know, traffic is not going to be a huge problem. You know, the sidewalks on Blue on Farrington are almost unusable because of how exposed they are to sun and traffic. So I'd really like to not see that happen at this new site as well. I'd like to see greater commitment to exceeding the UDO requirements for impermeable surfaces. There's a pond right next to this that people eat fish from. It drains into wetlands, and those are really protective from flooding for our home. I'd like to see more commitment to having a lower carbon footprint. Other sectors in the area are working to meet net zero requirements, and there's no commitment whatsoever at this project. I'd like to see that started. And I'd like to see basic bird and wildlife safety features here. I'd like to see windows that meet requirements to protect birds from crashes. I'd like to see night lights that are on motion centers. I'd like a commitment to landscaping with 100% native plants. Things that are cheap and pretty basic and that should be required everywhere. And I think the affordability commitments that they proposed are really inadequate. I mean, I'd like to see the people who are gonna not be able to have homes here anymore that are getting removed here, people who are renting to be able to afford to live in this place still. And I don't see how a one-time payment into a fund is adequate for that. So yeah, I'd like to see those concerns addressed. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we have Mimi Kessler.
Hello, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Mimi Kessler. I live at 1418 Woodland Drive in Durham. I am disappointed that the other Crescent Drive item was pulled from the agenda because if you notice, they're right next to each other. And the aerial map that was shown is missing a very large apartment development that's along Farrington Road. If you look at the aerial map, there's a black dotted line for where the city of Durham is. And so it comes off to the west of Farrington Road a bit, and that is that development that is not pictured there. And so I'm concerned about there's the blue on Farrington, which you can see in the map. I don't think that you can see the, not sure if you can see the senior living community building, but I'm concerned about the traffic on Farrington Road and the additive nature of all of these multi-family dwellings, which are absolutely needed. But I am concerned that that Rutgers Place and Cleora Drive are going to be all backed up at commuting time. And I don't know, I guess that, each one of these things comes up in isolation.
Ms. Kessler.
But if you start looking at the group, it's a lot. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Ethan Tyler.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, all right. Good evening, Council. My name is Ethan Tyler. I live at 5420 Wendell Road, right down the street from the proposed side, about 1,000 feet as the crow flies. Many of you here, I support new housing in Durham, especially new dense, affordable housing in Durham. And so I have several concerns about this project as it stands, while the development in theory here, I think is good overall. Firstly, something that's been echoed before is tree cover. The zoning map change report says there's no minimum tree coverage requirement. The current 8-acre site is mostly mature hardwood, native hardwood. And I think the loss of that for this area, for this housing with no plan for retention is, well, frankly, not very good for current and proposed future residents. As a previous commenter for previous proposals said earlier tonight, like we won't see the returns of planted trees now in our lifetimes. We can only maintain what we have now. And I think any plan, a minimum plan to keep and retain some of the hardwoods here, especially for the tree coverage they want to put on the roads, I think would be really welcome for current and future residents. And I have some economic concerns with this plan also. Speaking of roads, is the traffic in the area. As the plan states, their proposed traffic numbers would exceed the road capacity at about 574, and that's not taking into account the other two dense developments happening here, which will also further exceed the roadway capacity. I think any plan here should be tied to the expansion of public transit, move bus stops. The plan mentions there's a bus stop within a mile walk, and that is true. It's about a third mile away, right on 54. There's not a stop really. It's a sign on the grass on the side of the road. There's nowhere to sit. I think any development here should also be pressed with the expansion of public transit to meet the growing traffic needs. And
Ethan?
Yes.
Apologies, your 2 minutes are over.
Oh, well, thank you.
Thank you. I see Pam Williams has raised their hand. Pam, you'll have 2 minutes to provide your comments.
Yes, thank you. My name is Pam Williams. I live at 2130 Adventure Trail, Durham, North Carolina. I'm going to agree with Ethan, and I believe her name, Elizabeth, about the tree, maintaining existing trees, at least along the buffers and everything. Whether it's required or not, that's the right thing to do for any development, I feel like. And I think we should keep stressing that just because the ordinance says we don't have to, we should, again, because it's the right thing to do. Also, if anybody's listening and is concerned about 54 and Farrington and this area, then they should go to NCDOT's study that's going on right now for priority projects. And there was a project to improve this area. of NC 54 Crescent and the interchange at 40, and you should make it a priority for the TIP. And if y'all want that email address, I can send it to Austin. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? If so, please raise your hand at this time. Okay, seeing none, Mr. Ghosh, you had about 6.5 minutes left of your time if you would like to have any follow-up.
Yes, and thank you very much, Chair Amendolia. I do want to address a couple things. I think a lot of the concerns that we heard just now actually highlight part of the challenges with long-range planning. Specifically, I'll speak to tree preservation, which I think was mentioned by 3 out of the 4 speakers. And I would acknowledge that tree preservation in general sounds like a good thing, and it is. But this is in the compact neighborhood tier, and I just want to highlight something for you. You all are familiar with PDR rezoning. You've seen a ton of them. The PDR district is not a district which is allowed in the compact neighborhood tier. So in order to pursue something like that, we would have to have changed the tier for this property. So what we're trying to do is fit a residential development into the compact neighborhood tier standards, which are outlined in the RC district, which, yes, does not include tree preservation and does include a lower open space requirement. Those are standards which, yes, they could be exceeded. I'm not suggesting otherwise, but it is something that has the guidance in the comprehensive plan, the guidance in the future land use map, the guidance in our compact neighborhood tiers and in the UDO suggests these are the areas where you want to have denser development, more intense development, rather than focus on aesthetic buffers. Aesthetic buffers take up a lot of acreage in suburban areas that could be used for housing. I don't disagree that trees are a nice thing, but trees everywhere does impact the ability to provide much needed housing in certain areas, and this is one of those areas that has been identified for compact development. Another thing I wanted to touch on was the traffic. I don't dispute that traffic is bad in this area, but this is a development on 8.5 acres, and this project, I think I mentioned earlier, there's a site plan in review for 103 townhomes, and I suspect that 103 townhomes does not trip the UDO threshold required for a TIA, and so a TIA probably was not required for the site plan. It wasn't required at zoning either for this development. That doesn't negate that the traffic is what it is today, but this is, in the grand scheme of things, a rather small project. And finally, I did want to touch on the transit or bus stop. I think Mr. Ethan Tyler mentioned. Whenever we submit a rezoning, it is reviewed by several departments, including Go Durham and Go Triangle. They have the opportunity to request bus stops, and they didn't on this site. And part of the reason they didn't is because there is not a route over here. I don't disagree that transit in this area would be good, but we literally couldn't give them an easement. And I do mean that I did talk to Go Durham about it, because I find it quite odd that if a developer is willing to give an easement for transit, they wouldn't take it, but they won't, because when they have those easements, it does factor into their future planning, and they basically have to plan for service to those areas, and they don't want to be in a position where they have multiple stops in various areas of the city that they don't currently have any plans for transit. So this isn't just the developer saying, oh, I don't care about transit. That's not it. There's a whole lot of factors that go into it, and on this site, I mean, this is a long, skinny, narrow site that we think is most appropriate for housing, and there's a lot of multifamily in the area. This is a dense development that I think is going to provide some much needed for sale housing in the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ghosh. Okay, Alexander, do we have the aerial map for this? I'm gonna go a little bit out of order of what I typically do, but I want to use the aerial map to frame kind of my thoughts on this case. So just west of Farrington, we have this multifamily development, and then this project that we're discussing is just west of that. And then there's this giant parcel just west of that. When I look at this site, I imagine that giant parcel is eventually going to get developed. And what concerns me about this current trend of going in decreasing intensities as we travel west is that we will continue that trend as we move into this larger parcel and have a large subdivision go here filled with single-family housing and townhomes. Whereas to me, I look at this piece of land as a potential catalyst for mixed-use development. And having a set of townhomes in between what is now multifamily and what could be a mix of office and retail, to me will make it incredibly, a lot harder for it to become feasible for that potential mixed-use development to happen. And the comprehensive plan that we are currently working through, I think, has an eye towards this, given that in our place type guide, as it is currently drafted, this is all a transit opportunity area, which is meant to be a mix of uses that are accessible by transit. And so for me, I would actually rather see multifamily on these sites. I do have one question about that, because I recognize you also have to meet parking requirements on this site. Are parking requirements or other requirements, as they're currently written, preventing you from having multifamily units on these parcels?
So I don't know if Ashley, if you could speak to that. I will say TriPoint Homes, which is the developer here, is a developer of primarily townhomes. I'm not sure if you build any other type of units, but they don't build multifamily. But this site has not been pursued by multifamily developers, I think in part because of how narrow it is. So at its widest point, it's 360 feet wide. It's not that you couldn't build multifamily on this site. I think probably there is some building design that will fit. That's not really my role. But there are challenges with fitting the parking on there and the fire access all the way around a building on 360 feet wide, on 360 foot wide parcel. And that's at its widest point. I think it's down to 320 feet at its narrowest point. It's kind of a wedge shape on the map. I think that can be hard to see by the naked eye. And I can, I think, comment on that large parcel to the west that it is being considered for multifamily and potentially mixed use there as well. Not this project, though.
Okay, I was gonna ask, because you've been busy in this area lately, so
That I have.
wondered if you had some sense of what's going on there. Yeah, I think if something like that were to come to fruition, it would make it for a bit of an odd transition. I think that townhomes, to me, from a planning perspective, would be more appropriate to the north of this project. But I recognize the challenges with the width of the site. I think, to me, when I think of this, it would be, and I recognize your client and the applicant does not, they construct townhomes. In an ideal world, to me, this would be a good transitional space with maybe some open space or commercial and retail uses that transition and fit with what could be a mixed-use space there. But I recognize the constraints you've stated. So those are my thoughts on this. I'll give you a second to respond real quick.
Yeah, so I think it's unfortunate. I don't know if staff has the Collector Street plan readily available. If not, I think that's worth taking a look at. I think the way that the site sets up today, it kind of makes Farrington Road the obvious front. But there are other collector streets. There's actually at least 3, maybe 4, that are going to run through this overall area east-west, 2 of which go right through this property. There are going to be other streets that are going to be probably more used by the when it's all said and done, that are probably more appropriate for those types of uses to front upon than Farrington Road. I recognize the way it sits right now, that it may not look like that.
Okay, thank you. Other questions or comments?
I think Alexander is coming to the mic.
Alexander.
Alexander Cahill, Planning Department. I just wanted to add a little additional context to your question, Chair Amendolia. So that large parcel to the west, we did have a pre-submittal meeting on that parcel. Nothing formal has been submitted, but the applicant was proposing at the time to do transit supportive and pedestrian-oriented affordable housing on that site with a mix of affordable housing and market rate apartments. Not mixed use, but definitely a mix of housing types in terms of multifamily and townhouse units. So just hasn't been submitted yet, but that is what is being proposed at this time.
Thank you. Commissioner Carmen Williams.
Thank you, Chair Amendolia. I don't know. I understand that people have to have places to live. I just don't understand how, on one hand, we can talk about how we need to be so sustainable, but then we can turn back around and we can clear cut several acres of lots in order to provide townhomes that are going to look just like the lot across from it, where you don't see a single tree and barely any grass. So I just wish that someone with any type of creative aspect of design would come up with something else besides clear cutting land to build townhomes that are stuck together to walk nowhere, in the possibility that we're going to develop commercial site later on that's going to create even more clear cutting and more runoff. I don't get it. I don't understand for the life of me how the quality of life gets traded for, in the meantime, housing that people are not invested in for 15 and 20 years anymore. I don't get it. And I understand everybody talks about density, but so far in Durham, the only thing we have created is dense, expensive housing at the expense of what the long-term picture looks like for Earth. And I just think that we could be more creative in how we go about doing and developing in Durham. And I don't know, some people are from Durham, they're from the South, they're from some other places. I enjoy fall and the leaves turning. All of my leaves are off my tree now because of the things that we're experiencing, and it's frustrating because we value certain things over what we need. It does not matter if we overdevelop if in 30 years it's not here. Townhomes only exist because of clear cutting. Major apartment complexes only exist because of clear cutting. And we're creating massive heat islands within these cities that we dwell, and no plan for putting them back. And I just think that there should be some form of creativity that goes along with development to provide for the human need. Maybe develop a site where you've got a farm, or you've got solar, or you've got anything besides just pavement and townhomes. We've got to take a more responsible role as how we go about developing within the city of Durham and the state of North Carolina, period. Because we're losing our most precious resources in an effort to give somebody some place to live. And I think that we can be way more responsible in how we do that. That's it.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Commissioner Morgan.
Yeah, I had a question, and I know, Neil, you would actually refer to it as a question more for staff. The traffic, given it's a compact neighborhood, why wasn't a TIA, or I know we've gone through a number of developments in this area. Is there any plan for any kind of traffic study here?
Earlene Thomas Transportation. So for this particular development, it was not intense enough to trigger a TIA being required. Generally speaking, you would need about 256 townhomes to meet the city's threshold for requiring a traffic study. And I think maybe you were asking overarching, are there any large-scale traffic studies underway for the area. Unfortunately, there are not, unless there's a major development that's required to do a TIA. The MPO, the DCHC MPO, does update their travel demand models and anticipated traffic volumes throughout the entire area, which sort of are what they use to plan for future long-range projects. There are some on the long-range transportation plan, however, they are not currently funded that are anticipated to address the growth in traffic over the 20 to 30-year period.
Thank you. I guess my big concern is we're doing this parcel by parcel in this area. And it seems like that there is already it's a compact neighborhood. We know that it's on the MPO plan for some improvements. It seems like as we're looking at stuff like that, it should almost trigger some kind of a traffic study, especially in this area, especially it's a dense area, and then there's going to be traffic, and then certainly if we're adding more and more parcels to this, we should look at it from a larger picture, kind of like it's the same, so one of my favorite topics is traffic, is figuring out how do we have that, and it seems like in partnership with NCDOT, we should really look at this area a little bit more closely, especially when we get new applicants in this area. And I understand, like you said, it didn't trigger a TIA, but it would be good to know a little bit more what would be the total impact of a lot of the things we're seeing. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Baker.
I want to confirm one thing with staff real quick. Something that I heard one of the speakers talk about was street trees. And my understanding is that we require street trees, that street trees are required in the parkway between the curb and the sidewalk. Is that correct?
That's what it's on the other way.
The answer is yes, that is correct.
Awesome. So just wanted to, and I'm sorry, since you're there, can you tell me, is it every 30, every 40 feet?
We will, just give us a minute, we'll look that up.
Okay, it's not important. It's probably between every 30 or 40 feet. So that's one thing. We didn't used to require street trees. Then we decided, hey, we should require street trees. So I think that some of the speakers and what I've been hearing up here on the commission too speaks a lot to the fact that, look, developers they want to come here and they want to make money. They're going to oftentimes do the bare minimum. Not always, sometimes they'll go above and beyond, but we're often asking, we're in a position where we're requiring very little of developers, and we need to ask them for stuff that we really should be putting in place requirements for developers to be able to, as Commissioner Carmen Williams was speaking to, be able to balance creating more housing and also creating a livable, green, sustainable city as some of the speakers were talking about. So I really feel very strongly that, in speaking to some of my other commissioner colleagues about kind of thinking about the big picture and master planning, that there's a gap here that we need to fill. Coming back and bringing things back down to this site, I actually, strangely enough, this might be the first time I've ever said this to you, Neil, but I agree with this proposal in terms of it being an appropriate land use for this area, being townhomes. I also like in the proposal that it has alleys. One thing that I was going to ask for the applicant is, and I'll get to it in just a second, but getting an understanding of what the depth of the lots are, in hopes that, typically when we see townhomes, it's sort of like a townhome that's sitting way back from the street. There's lots of impervious driveways. As you walk down the street, all you see is driveway, garage frontages. With the alleys, you have an opportunity to bring the townhome up to the front and create more walkability. The other thing is the connectivity that we're seeing. Again, this is something that we're trying to address now, and staff's working on it. But the Planning Commission initiated the UDO amendments to create more connectivity, and we're seeing more connectivity in this proposal with punch-throughs of streets. And then there are other things that I think that we could potentially address as a commission and that staff could work on with us as well in terms of sustainability and creating more green sustainable requirements, pocket parks and public park dedication and those kinds of things and other ideas that people have. But want to come back and ask you, Neil, about what is the lot depth, and will that lot depth allow for the townhome to come to the front and for there to be a little bit of personal livable space in the backyard and even potentially accessory dwelling units?
So I think I mentioned we have a site plan in review. This is Ashley Hales with Stewart, who is, I think, doing the site plan. And I think you were saying that the lots are maybe 80-foot depth? A minimum of 80-foot depth to accommodate the driveways in the front, and the alley-loaded ones are also 80? The alley-loaded townhomes also are 80-foot depth.
Okay. Yeah, I think often what I've seen in sort of some best practices is sort of 90 to 100 to allow for more, because the lot is smaller, to allow for a little bit more of a backyard. And that's also something that I've been hearing from a lot of folks who live in the townhome communities in South Durham, is they wish that they had backyards. So just something to think about.
I'm glad you mentioned. I will say part of the challenge on this site is getting, so the RC district, we have to hit at minimum 12 dwelling units per acre. That's what we're hitting, I think. We're 1 unit over on the site plan. And so I imagine larger lots would probably put us under that 12 dwelling units per acre that we're required to hit as minimum in this compact neighborhood tier in this zoning district, just to give some flavor to it.
And what are the lot widths?
22?
Okay. All right, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. Commissioner Cartwright.
Appreciate it, Chair. And I recognize we're coming up on time, so I'll make this quick. One, I appreciate the nuance associated with you and your developer meeting the requirements and what those requirements are, and the fact that we should be doing a better job. Everybody's talked about long-range planning and the requirements that we have as in Durham's UDO, and the burden should probably be on us or Durham planning to improve those. The other thing that Nate mentioned is we're in a unique position to ask for things, so I'm going to ask about affordable housing. And one, appreciate the $50,000, I think is what it was, donation. Has there been any consideration given to maybe donating some lots in some form or fashion to affordable housing in terms of home ownership?
Yeah, so we've looked into this from an underwriting standpoint specifically. I will just say that this site, so I believe in the staff report it mentions we're required to handle the 100-year water quantity, I guess is really what we're talking about here. And we're also have to hit this 12 dwelling units per acre. So one of the things that this site plan is implementing is underground stormwater solution, which, and I think it's like two underground stormwater, I don't know what to call them, tanks, but detention vaults, which to my knowledge is the most expensive way to do that, but it's something that we're required to do on the site in order to hit both the required 100-year detention and the density. So we are having, I don't think that we're in a position to donate lots to, like a Habitat or something like that for affordable housing, I think is essentially what you were asking. I also will just note, I think Alexander was coming back to the mic to maybe answer the street tree question.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I just want to answer your question, Commissioner Baker. So it's every 40 feet, unless it's an understory tree, and then it's every 30 feet.
Thank you. one quick comment, just Mr. Ghosh, just for your information. Whenever we have people attending virtually, so we need folks to speak into the mic. So as you're relaying information from Ashley, you've been doing it right by repeating what she says. But if she starts saying things that you don't then repeat, we need her to come and speak into the mic so everyone attending virtually can hear what she's saying.
Sure, no problem. Thank you.
I would like to move this forward to a vote quickly before we hit our recess. Commissioner Cease.
I may not be able to comply with your request. And I think it's important, just because as has been evident through the discussion tonight, this is an important site. And despite, or I shouldn't say despite, I agree with your characterization. I believe you made it earlier as it's really a relatively small site in the grand scheme of things, and it is, but it's a real keystone type of site. It positioned between the development that's already occurred on Farrington and the large parcel to the west, all of which is included in this compact neighborhood tier. So I have a couple of questions, and then I want to make some comments. And if we need to break, we need to break. But I feel like these are important things for us to go through. My first question is the 5% open space that's required. Kind of where is that to be positioned on the site, and how is it to be configured, or what is it? And I appreciate the details you've shared with regards to townhouse footprints and dimensions and things of that sort. So asking more about the open space.
Why don't you ask another question, and we can come back to the answer to this after the break, because I know we're going to hit it. And I don't know the answer, to be clear.
That's what I was about to suggest, is just run through your questions.
Do you want to break?
Say like run through all your questions, and then after the break, Mr. Ghosh can respond to them.
Yeah, I think that would work.
Okay, so the second question is just to confirm, and this could be either you, Neil, or staff, the collector street plan to which is kind of guiding the placement of the street along the northern part of the parcel. That is the version that was adopted when? If Google tells the truth, it was 2007. Does that sound right?
I think that sounds
I was going to say 2008, but
that's what I was going to say.
2007.
We'll just say 2007 to 8.
So in the grand scheme of things, a lot has happened since then. There was this little transit project that didn't happen, and a few other things. I had no kids then, now I have 4. The world has changed. And I think some of those changes are worth discussing relative to just some of the constraints that are placed on what your team has had to work with. I'll stop there with questions.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll take our 10-minute recess, and we'll come back at 7:40.
A lot of people have worries about the staffing. It's been a huge issue for the public. Are we adequately staffed? What do low staffing levels actually mean for your ability to answer calls?
Currently, our staffing levels is roughly, we have 69% of vacancies filled. We have mechanisms in place that were better than before, to where we can better manage our staff, better leverage our team members, their skill sets. We can diversify our team members and what they're able to do. So I think that that's given us an added plus, a step up to be able to really help and build our capabilities as we continue to work on filling our staffing.
We don't always agree who to pull for on game day, but we all can agree that litter is bad for North Carolina.
Here's some tips to ensure that your garbage and recycling gets picked up. 1. Your cart should be put out for collection before 6 a.m. on your collection day. 2. Your cart should be at least 3 feet from all other objects such as mailboxes, telephone poles, fire hydrants, trees, and other carts. 3. Your cart should be no more than 3 feet from the curb. 4. No vehicles should be blocking your carts. The mechanical arms on our trucks need direct access to your carts and cannot reach around vehicles. To find more information about garbage and recycling pickups, go to this web address.
Did you know the City of Durham has interpretation and translation services available? The city adopted a language access plan to provide language services and help non-English speakers have access to city services and programs without a language barrier. Through the city's language access plan, residents have the right to request interpretation and translation services free of charge, receive translation of vital documents and emergency communications in Spanish, and submit complaints of language discrimination or on the failure to adequately provide services in accordance with the city's language access plan policy. For more information on the city's language access efforts, visit durhamnc.gov/languageaccess. ¿Sabía que la ciudad de Durham cuenta con servicios de interpretación y traducción? La ciudad adoptó un plan de acceso al idioma para ofrecer servicios lingüísticos y ayudar a que las personas que no hablan inglés puedan tener acceso a los servicios y programas de la ciudad sin la barrera del idioma. Por medio del plan de acceso al idioma, los habitantes tienen derecho a solicitar sin costo alguno servicios de interpretación y traducción, recibir la traducción de documentos importantes y de comunicaciones de emergencia en español, presentar una denuncia de discriminación por motivos de idioma o por no recibir servicios de manera adecuada de acuerdo con la política del plan de acceso al idioma de la ciudad. Para recibir más información sobre la labor de la ciudad relacionada con el acceso al idioma, visita durhamnc.gov/acceso.
I was looking for an opportunity, and an old friend of mine suggested that I apply at Go Durham. The community really relies on us, on Go Durham public transportation.
Well, I like driving a bus because of the friendly culture. I love it in the morning when people greet me, good morning, they give me a friendly wave, they appreciate you. And that goes a long way being a bus driver in Go Durham.
Anything can be achieved here. You can come in at the bottom and you will be able to excel in fairly a short amount of time. Here, I started as an operator and I'm here now as an operator training specialist. So as long as you stick to it, you can excel.
The perfect candidate that would excel at Go Durham is someone with tenacity, someone with drive, someone who wants to make a difference for their community.
You have to be people-oriented, you have to be experienced, and you have to be on hands, ready to go, but with the proper training, it's just like driving a car.
So as a new driver with road training, come in and you see me and I'm gonna make sure you have all the tools to succeed.
They give you a lot of input and they work with you step by step, so you won't be alone in this.
To anyone considering working for Go Durham, you won't regret it. Please come, please apply. We would love to have you join the Go Durham team.
Commissioner Williams? Commissioner Williams? Commissioner Williams, take your seat, please.
You're going to get on this and it's going to be late. Let's go. All right. It's 7:40. We're going to return from recess, and Commissioner Cease, you may continue your questions.
Thank you. As might be expected with the 10-minute break, I came up with one more question for the applicant. So just to clarify, and again, I appreciate you walking through the details about the site plan. Not that you've shared a lot, but you've shared some really key things that we don't often get when we're reviewing a development plan. The alley is pretty clearly indicated in terms of the configuration of the building envelope and parking envelope. Are the lots along the western side of the parcel front loaded or rear loaded?
They are front loaded.
And just elaborate on kind of that versus kind of a different configuration to allow greens, et cetera.
Yeah, we looked at trying to do some alley-loaded product on that side. I think the issue we ran into is that our understanding is that every townhome has to front onto a street, even if it's alley-loaded. And so you'll see the way that on the development plan, the way that it's configured, the building and parking envelopes, each of them, all three of them, front onto a street.
And so it's fair to say that if there wasn't the ordinance requirement of each individually platted townhome having street frontage, that would free up a lot of possibilities for designing this site, maybe with an east-west green, shared frontage spaces, et cetera, correct? And maybe higher yields, higher density?
So I'll be cautious how I answer that, just because I don't design plans the way that you do or Ashley does.
Well, I see her nodding her head.
All right, well, there you go.
No, okay, she doesn't want to commit, okay. Well, suffice it to say, I guess, I do have problems, a number of concerns about the configuration that's shown in the proposal that's before us, but I think I want to be clear that only a couple of those concerns reside in your court, so to speak. I think a lot of the concerns are related to both the collector street plan and as we were just kind of highlighting some of the ordinance requirements and some of the things that came up earlier in the conversations, both from the public and from my fellow commissioners, with regards to street trees or the absence of street trees prior to a certain date and time. And I think I'd like to maybe categorize these concerns in a couple of ways. So let's start with the collector street plan that has this dash line on a paper generated in another era that has been kind of indoctrinated from a policy perspective, such that now that the world has shifted quite a bit, and the big shift in this area, of course, is kind of the origin of the compact neighborhood tier to begin with, and that was the light rail alignment that's now no longer with us. So Wendell, which is just a little bit to the north, 100 feet, 150 feet or so maybe to the north, was, I would imagine, contemplated to be truncated by the light rail, which led to the location of this street, which does not extend further east. It's just a T intersection into Crescent Drive. It led to the kind of the positioning of this street, which leads to a couple of things that the applicant's already referenced or has already come up in the conversations with regards to how it extends into the parcel to the west, but it also leads to a really, really long block in the absence of block length standards. So it looks like there's about 750 feet between these two collector street plans. The required locations of these collector streets. And your development plan shows no variation in alignment whatsoever, and that's probably a product of this being a fairly narrow parcel. So that's number one, an incredibly long block by any planning measure. And no differentiation in terms of building position, which I'm not an advocate of that requirement in the ordinance. But in this case, we're talking about where desirable city blocks may be 400 feet, 500 feet, maybe 600 feet. To not have that length interrupted by an east-west passage, whether it's a green or path, I think is really problematic. And I think that even without the ordinance requirements, that's something that could be included. Now, it would be impactful in terms of loss of units. But I think it's important to speak about that in terms of the building envelopes that are shown here relative to the conversations that have already occurred about connecting to the west. So that's one point. But out of that, I have to ask, what's the mechanism whereby the dashed line on the plan from 2007 gets modified based on changing conditions? That's a question for staff.
Earlene Thomas, Transportation. So the plan itself does need to be updated and revised. It did go through a public involvement and adoption process, and so the same would need to happen to revise the plan.
Even when we know that one key driver of the plan is no longer a reality, no longer in the mix.
The short answer is yes. We would have to go through that revision process. I wouldn't have the ability to just relocate the collector streets from their existing location without going through a formal process.
Even with the width of a pen on a 400 scale map.
So generally, what we look at is and consider that as a center line of the road in the general location. We do work with applicants to minimize impacts through their site, keeping the entry and exit points fixed. But this site does not afford a lot of flexibility due to the size of it and being so narrow.
Yeah, well, I think that we've kind of come up against the crux of just kind of the institutionalized practices and expectation, and there's no individual responsibility here from the city or the applicant side, but this is a scenario in which I think there's there would be an immense agreement from both a transportation perspective and certainly from a planning design perspective to not have to deal with such long blocks and to not have to deal with the placement that was generated. And I worked with the applicant on the western parcel probably 15 years ago, and I worked with the stationary planning for the light rail, so I know this area a little bit. And it is kind of the task is to create something out of nothing in terms of destinations and mix of uses, and this is one small piece in the parcel, in the puzzle, I should say. But even if that collector street plan was to be able to be repositioned slightly to the south, whatever it is, that would be beneficial in many ways without being detrimental to anything other than fidelity to a 15-year-old process. And so I think that's an opportunity maybe for elected officials to look at maybe other ways to weigh that consideration. I do think that the density, I understand the challenges from the design side, but I think that when I say the challenges of achieving the minimum density, I think you're at 103, you need to be at 102 to comply with the requirements. I think that just screams for adding to the mix there, and it's not it's a small site, but not a tiny site, 8 acres or whatever it is. I mean, there's room for something more than a 750-foot long block face or 3 block faces of townhouses. And so I would really encourage the applicant to think about different ways to configure the site. I'd encourage staff to look at ways to modify the ordinance, especially this required frontage on public streets for every simple platted lot. That's not standard practice in a lot of locales, and I know it's constraining to a lot of projects here in Durham. A lot of the design creativity that Commissioner Williams was hoping to rope in, but a lot of that design creativity is impeded by our ordinance and our public works standards. So that's all I have. I'm not in support of the project, but I think I wanted to make clear that it's not just because of what the applicant has brought us. They're kind of trying to fit into a narrow wedge that is problematic in multiple ways here.
Thank you. Any other commissioners' questions or comments? If not, I would like to move this forward to a vote.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that case number Z2200007 Crescent Townes to be forwarded to the City Council for a favorable recommendation.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Morgan, seconded by Vice Chair Cameron. Is there any further discussion on the motion?
Yes, staff needs to clarify the proffers that were made,
Yes,
please.
thank
before we
you.
vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we would commit to detaining the 1, 2, 10, and 100-year storm, although I know the staff report said that's required on the site, so I didn't know if that was a commitment that we could make.
And also, there was a mention of a donation to Durham Public Schools.
Yep, that was $25,000, and to the Affordable Housing Fund, $50,000.
We would also accept the commitment to the 100-year peak flow, if that's what you're proffering.
1 second. Was that? Okay, yes, yep, that will work. Thank you.
Commissioner Morgan, can you amend
Yeah, I amend my motion to include the appropriate proffers.
Chair, would you please repeat the second for me? I'm just trying to.
Yes, the second was Vice Chair Cameron.
Thank you.
Do I need to second the amended? Sure. Second.
With that, we'll have the roll call vote.
Chair Amendolia,
No.
Vice Chair Cameron,
Yes.
Commissioner Baker,
Yes.
Commissioner Shigaris,
No.
Commissioner Cutright,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
No.
Commissioner Harrod,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Cease, Commissioner Carmen Williams.
No.
Appears to be a tie, which means the motion fails.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to staff, thank you to the applicant, and I encourage you to continue working on this as it moves forward to City Council. Can somebody get Commissioner McGyver back in, I believe? He was out in the lobby a moment ago, but he can rejoin us. And in the meantime, I believe, so we are done with our public hearings for the evening. We'll now turn to our new business items. I believe we'll start with a presentation from Scott on the comprehensive plan.
Good evening. I'm Scott Whiteman with the Planning Department. Just want to give you a brief update on the schedule for the comprehensive plan, particularly letting you all know how it affects you and your schedule as well. So, Alexander, do you have the, oh, there it is. All right, so if we go to the next slide. So last month we just completed the internal city and county departmental review of the proposed policies and action items. We are working to release the revised draft policies, the updated place type map, and the updated place type guide by the end of this month. So that'll be available to everybody and anybody who's interested in looking at them. We're working on November 17th, trying to schedule a retreat with the Planning Commission to discuss all of those items. In December of 2022, we're going to review all those items with the Joint City County Planning Committee. If you go to the next slide. So in early January, we'll release the full draft of the plan in its final format. We'll be doing some countywide public engagement, both digital and COVID willing in person throughout the county. This will be mostly on informing folks about what is in the final draft of the comprehensive plan. What we want to propose is that we start the public hearing process with the Planning Commission with the first public hearing in February. This means that some of the engagement will still be going on at the same time. But we just want to understand that the draft that we'll have proposed the final draft that we propose is probably the best we can do as a staff on trying to meet all of the needs and opinions in the community, and that we want to help steer people towards the public hearing process for when they have disagreements with what's in the plan. And then we're going to work tentatively to have a joint County Commission, City Council public hearing scheduled in June, which will hopefully give the Planning Commission several months to deliberate on the comprehensive plan. I'll say one of the things driving the schedule is we wanted to try our best to avoid doing any engagement activities during the November and December holiday season, because we found that's a pretty inconvenient time to get folks involved. I will say, while the adoption process is going on, we're going to work on doing whatever we can to get the implementation of the comprehensive plan started even before it's finally adopted. The key thing that's probably of interest to a lot of you all is to get the rewrite of the UDO moving so that we don't have to wait until the comprehensive plan is adopted before we start working on that. So that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Scott. And I just want to comment that my goal in all of this is to try and get us through the adoption process by April. And in order to do that, it may become necessary to have additional meetings in the months of February, March, and April. So I would just note for everyone to just try and be cognizant of your calendars during those months. My hope is that we won't need a lot of extra meetings, that we can be more expeditious in our rezoning cases during those months, and that will enable us to have plenty of opportunity for public hearing during our regularly scheduled meetings. But if we need additional meetings during those months, then I will work with staff to exercise the right to add meetings there. Any questions, comments?
Just in April is spring breaks.
Okay, that's a good point. Vice Chair Cameron just mentioned to me that during April, there's typically spring breaks, so we may want to be cognizant of that in terms of trying to think about DPS schedules. Commissioner Morgan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Scott, I had one question. What's the status of the Southeast Durham Small Area Plan? I know it's been in draft form. Are we completing that, or where is that now?
So that was kind of like a precursor of the whole comprehensive plan just for that area. So the things that were incorporated in the draft of that have been incorporated into the full draft of the comprehensive plan.
Okay, because I've got residents asking, since I live in the area, you know, where is this going?
Yeah, so it will be part of the full comprehensive plan for the whole county.
Okay.
Commissioner Baker.
I just wanted to say that it would be great to get the UDO rewrite going as quickly as possible. That's all.
Agreed.
Thank you. Great. So with that, we'll move to our final business item of the night, which is approving our 2023 calendar. While we are doing this, we're also going to move our November meeting from, I believe it's currently scheduled on November 8th, and we're moving it back 1 week to November 15th because November 8th is an election day. We had moved to move the meeting back in January. I checked the minutes, but we never officially set the date for it. So we're going to set the date for November 15th. Does anybody have any comments or requested changes for the meeting agenda or meeting calendar? Commissioner Harrod.
I was just going to ask, could we possibly move it to a Thursday? I'm going to be out of town on that day. But.
So that Thursday we'll have a retreat as well.
Oh, that's right.
For the November meeting. Yeah, and I think we also already have the chambers booked for that, so it might be hard to change now.
Yeah, Chair Amendolia, we checked with several dates with the clerk's office for the chamber's availability, and that was the only one. We can make a note that we moved the meeting date on you, and you should get an excused absence since you were planning for a different date. We'll make sure that happens regardless because of the switch. So.
Sure. Vice Chair King. Okay. Great. With that, I would accept a motion to approve the 2023 calendar.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed have the same right. Okay, passes unanimously. Does staff have any other items for us before we adjourn?
Yes, thank you, Chair Amendolia. We just want to give you a preview or heads up of what to expect in November. We will have 7 cases on the November agenda. We apologize. We don't submit the cases, we just receive them. 2 of them are unique. One of them is a development agreement. So you might have some questions. If you see things you are unfamiliar with or don't know how to read, please reach out to staff ahead of time. The second one is a UDO text amendment on the development plan revisions, which you'll see as well. We brought to JCCPC at the beginning of the month. So 2 unique cases and then 5 rezoning cases.
Okay, thank you. Noted. And yeah, let's make sure that we come ready and have most of our questions asked beforehand so that we can be expeditious in that meeting.
Yeah, y'all really owe me. You really owe me for that's my birthday.
Oh yeah, that's right. That meeting is Vice Chair Cameron's birthday, so we especially need to be expeditious that night so we can go celebrate. All right, this meeting is adjourned at...
One other question, we need to do an excused absence for Commissioner Zuri Williams.
Commissioner Zuri Williams did not meet the criteria for an excused absence. She gave notice within 24 hours, and it was a work emergency.
Okay.
So we don't need to vote on that. So this meeting is adjourned at 8:01 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you.